From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to SBI TV, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today we're going to show how revenue leaders can build a legacy in their company that long survives their departure. You might think about this as an edgy topic, so I'm looking forward to discussing this. I'm your host, Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. Joining me in the studio today is a special guest, Eric Vermillion, who is a good friend of mine, good friend of the firm's. Eric was the former CRO of BlueCat. So, first off, good to see you, man.
Good to be here.
Thanks for coming by. And maybe by way of getting started, because this was a topic that bubbled up to us from a lot of folks in the field, and you've been kind enough because you got a good opinion on it. But before we get into that, maybe just introduce yourself to the audience, a couple of your career stops along the way, and maybe your most recent run at BlueCat.
Yeah, you bet. So I've spent my career in technology and in software sales, primarily application software. Longest run was at NICE Systems, where I spent 8 years and got to be part of the story from 200 million to $1 billion. Yeah. Followed that with a couple of years at a Francisco Partners-owned company that was a bit of a turnaround. And then I've spent the last 3.5 years at BlueCat, where I just left. We sold the company to Madison Dearborn Partners out of Chicago, and I'm working on the next thing.
The next thing.
Yeah.
Very good. So when it comes to that run you've had, and you're at this sort of critical juncture of what I would say is halftime, right, in one's career, sort of early, mid-ish 40s, right? Not revealing anything.
Warning or something.
That's right. So how are you thinking about things in terms of the next stop? Because you've had a great run and you've had some really good experience. But I mean, our viewers and listeners go through exactly what you're going through. How's the process been so far?
Yeah, it's fun. There's a ton of interesting stuff out there, and software is a good place to be. I'm at a point at halftime now where I don't have to work for jerks. I can be a little bit more selective in what I do, and so I'm planning to go somewhere and have a lot of fun and have a good run.
Glad you're here, man. So for those of you that are watching or listening, and if you don't want to miss any of our shows or our podcasts, if you want to access the content library, if you're an iPhone user, all you have to do is download the SBI app. And that's very simple. Just go to the App Store, search for Sales Benchmark Index, and then just use your iPhone for the notifications, and we can keep you company on your commute, while you're lifting weights, while you're standing in line at TSA. So let's jump into the questions. So Eric and I are going to talk about this whole concept around building a tradition and a legacy. So why this topic? So Eric, you and I were chatting before the show, and I told you some of the topic creation that we have reflects the feedback we get from viewers and listeners and people that come through the studio in Dallas going, hey, what about this? Or do you have anything on that? Or what do you see on this? What do you see on that? And this whole concept of like legacy and sustainability as sales leaders historically have an 18 to 24 month tenure. For the 12 and a half years we've been doing this at SBI, and I've been here for almost all of those, that's a metric we pay attention to, and the data has not moved in terms of the average tenure of the leader. However, the desire of the sales leaders to leave an impression, and I think most people that lead people, they want to know they made an impact. So you're kind enough to take this topic, and I think you've got a good purview into what this looks like. So you might be saying out there, how does a sales leader think about walking in, starting a legacy, leaving a legacy? So maybe why don't we start just from sort of grounding people around expectations. And when you think about that term of a legacy, what comes to mind for you relative to running a sales organization?
Yeah, look, I think if it's John Wooden or something like that you're shooting for, given that tenure that you just described, it's probably unrealistic. But I think the benchmark needs to be make it a better place than it was when you got there. I've never understood people that take joy in seeing things collapse when they leave. It just doesn't compute for me. I think the best barometer of your success is when you see it beget success, beyond your time there. And so I feel very confident that every place I've been from the time I was a rep, through to the last stint at BlueCat, I left it in a better spot than it was when I got there, and I'm happy to see the success that continued beyond my departure in all those places.
So we got the chance, and I got the chance to have a little bit of a front row seat to what you did at BlueCat most recently. But I guess share with the audience, when you think about like building a sales culture and building this identity that outlasts one's tenure. If you think about companies like a PTC or an EMC or an ADP, apparently everything has 3 initials. When you think about some of these great sales cultures, right, that we know and or worked in and were part of, there are all these like sort of identifying characteristics about being part of that.
Yeah.
If one is watching the show and says, yeah, I want to build that slowly but surely, and I know it doesn't get done overnight, where do you start?
Well, we're not here today to talk about corporate strategy, right, or those things. I mean, you got to have that stuff. Those are, some of the fundamentals. And then, just from a sales execution perspective, you got to have a sound sales methodology. You got to have good training and enablement for your team, good forecasting methodology. You got to understand the metrics. But those aren't, they can check out all of the materials that SBI's put out for for reams of stuff on that. The part that I think is kind of the secret sauce is the tradition aspect of it. And if you think about it, when you do something once, people sometimes get excited about it. There's a little bit of a rah-rah effect, but it's quickly forgotten. You do it twice, maybe people will say, why don't we do that again? But once you do things 3 times, I mean, many boys' weekend, trips to Vegas have become tradition by that same methodology, right?
Yes. Different reasons, but they become traditions. Yes.
But you do it 3 times, it becomes a tradition. I think building those kind of traditions. People that have worked in my organization know that they're going to do a personal business plan every year. I've instituted something called a deal partner program, where it forces people to talk about deals with people they ordinarily wouldn't, because there are a lot of other intelligent people that you work with that can probably help you other than your sales manager. People that work for me know that we're going to get together twice at the kickoff and during the middle of the year. They know they're going to see my face every week. It doesn't matter if you've got a 10-person sales organization or 200 or 2,000-person sales organization. I haven't had the privilege of leading a 2,000-person one yet, but that seeing my face every week and hearing what we did well last week and what we're going to go out and do this week is. That's a tradition that I think people that are part of my organization believe in. And then I think one of the things that we take advantage, executives take for granted, and certainly CROs, is that when you're in that position, you've got the opportunity to drive a lot about the culture of the organization.
Well said.
And so, if the culture that you want to create is one that people don't have respect for their personal family time, you can do that in a hurry by getting pissed off at people for not responding to an email on Sunday morning. If you embrace the ethical gray area, then that can become a cultural thing in a hurry. So you gotta realize that when you're the leader, you got to be firm in your position on both those tangible sales execution things, but also in the, building the traditions, and then sort of the soft things that make it an interesting place to be.
So if you think about what Eric talked about there were the symbolic cadence things that are all part of a leader putting their own spin and image and fabric into the organization, right? Eric said the personal business plan, the deal partner program. Many of you watching or listening probably have your thing. Whatever it is, it's something that helps identify this sales culture that you're creating. So, Eric, on the softer piece and talking about culture, the thing that I always default to, and SBI well enough to know we're a very values-driven firm, right? Everybody in my firm carries a values card in their money clip or in their purse. We talk about a value every day. We got values on the wall in the studio. We recognize, it's a big thing, because I believe the values are how you behave. So they have to be action-oriented. That's something we do here. I'm not saying everybody has to do it, but that's something that is that's really important about being at SBI. When you think about that unique sales culture, but the sales culture existing in the business culture, because I run a small firm, it's pretty easy to do that with 100 people, right? Or easier. When you're running an organization with a couple thousand people and you've got departments and multiple locations, international, thoughts on the sales culture inside the overall corporate culture?
You mean as it relates to interaction with the rest of the organization?
And not having sales walled off to it's like, ooh, that's what we do in sales, but this is what the rest of the company does.
Yeah, well, I think we've all worked for, any of us who've had more than a few years in sales have worked for that organization where sales builds the wall, or there's this, higher than thou sort of perspective that people have. And I think that's super harmful. Yep. And so, having a level of transparency is critical in, making the rest of the organization feel like they're a part of what's going on in sales. I think sales is critical to the success of an organization. Yep. But so is good product development. Yep. So is good work by the legal team and the finance team and the people team. Yep. And the more you appreciate that and get your sales organization to appreciate that, and I think that absolutely starts with the leader. I mean, the tone that the leader sets with the rest of the disciplines in the organization carries through to their team in a big way.
All right. So segment one, we talked about the foundation around sales culture, where it sits and how you think about a legacy. Segment two, we're going to talk about this whole concept of a silo. Before we do that, for those of you that are tuning in, you might be asking yourself, how do you get access to best practices, benchmarking data, comparing yourself with others? A quick visit to the studio to drop by and say hello to myself and my team is one way that you can do that. We're here in Dallas. Always good to see you if you are in town or you think you want to come to the studio and help yourself make your own number. So you can reach out to Melissa. She will ensure that you get all the key logistics, but also know what we're doing here, from hosting monthly events to bringing in key panels that different folks sit on, like Eric, to when we bring in our client advisory board. All right, so segment two, we're going to talk a little bit about how to get sales out of the silo. So if you think about most companies, there is a view of salespeople, quote, they're different, they're on the road, they're traveling. So, Eric, what have you seen, I guess, in terms of this integration, and maybe talk about like 2 or 3 like deliberate things and maybe even mistakes you made early in your leadership career that you've now corrected later in your leadership career to have integration and interlock between sales and the rest of the functions?
Yeah, well, we talked about the transparency earlier. I think the attitude in transparency is something that's, it's just, I can't stress that enough. It's the rest of the organization sees that. And I think, one of the things that I still struggle with is being good about telling the stories in such a way that it highlights the success of the overall opportunity and the contribution that the entire company made to it. I think I tend to err on the side of the belief that salespeople get a ton of recognition, both financially and with awards and trips and other things. And so I sometimes confuse bragging, with sharing good stories, and I don't like the bragging piece. But it's important to let the rest of the organization know that there's a downstream effect to what they do, and let them see the result of it and share in the victories, not just as a sales organization, but with the rest of the rest of the company.
Yep. So if we take that one step further, how have you seen the folks in, say, product or finance or ops, depending on the organization, how have you seen them react to when what I'm taking from you is that you went first? Yeah. Right? You sort of extended the olive branch, if you will. What's been the reaction, and how have you overcome resistance?
Well, I think you need to focus on outcomes, and you need to have sort of an organizational syntax around what are our capabilities. When you think about any good, particularly when we think about software and we're talking about the means by which our customers get value from what we do, in a software world, they all came about it probably in a very, very different way. And so you've kind of got those pillars of value that tend to be the things that we want to talk about with our customers. I think it gives you a good syntax to talk to product people with. It gives you a good syntax to talk to the finance team or the people team in terms of being able to say what you did directly impacted the value that this customer saw.
And the feeling that people get when you tell them that, when they know that their impact is being felt on the front line.
It's huge. And I think this is probably something that every salesperson struggles with, is when their customer says, this is something that's wrong, I need you to fix this. They run to the product team and say, I need you to fix this because I can't close this deal without it. And if you stay focused on the outcomes and that organizational syntax, it empowers the people in the product team to say, wait a minute, I understand that your customer wants this. They're the only one that's asking for it. And how does this contribute to those pillars of value that we've identified, or those critical capabilities that we've identified are the way we want to be known in our market.
So I guess one more question on this part before our next break. So now I go down to the reps and the managers, and I think about voice of the customer, and think about or NPS feedback or whatever the case may be, and we see a really wide array of feedback loops or lack thereof between those that are on the front line and those that are making what's getting sold on the front line, to have that cross-pollination and have the interlock between them. Thoughts on how you've activated that and made that happen in organizations?
Yeah, well, I think probably, even in some of the biggest companies in the world, there are a handful of deals that make or break any quarter.
Amen, brother. Amen.
And so, I like to get functional leaders or their designee every single week on a call to talk about those big deals. It creates an opportunity for people to see, what their impact is. And it also creates an opportunity to get them vested, in the success of those deals, and in sort of a shared mutual environment for success. So I think that's a real good way to make sure that the other functional leaders are a part of it, or that they're designating someone, or that they're maybe purposefully designating someone to get some visibility into what's going on.
Very good. All right. So speaking of future leaders, if you are watching or listening to the show and you believe that you have a point of view that our many listeners and viewers would benefit from in the spirit of helping people make their number, reach out to Melissa, and she will ask you a few questions, and we can get on a telephone call, because it would be great to host you here. We're always looking for the best and the brightest, and while we have good reach, we don't know everything that's happening. So if you believe you have a CEO or head of sales, a head of marketing, and somebody we should be featuring, love to hear why, and love to host them here in Dallas. So E, with this last section, I want to talk about future leaders and this whole concept of succession, and as that perpetuates legacy. And we've both been fortunate to have worked with folks who have done that for us and then try to do it, right, and paid forward. So how do you... what's your point of view relative to your own directs? And I know at BlueCat, you personally went out, brought in people from your past, which to me was a telltale sign that you had done things right prior to that, because a leader has followers and you had followers. So talk a little bit about that and your philosophy.
Yeah, I think it's my role as a leader is to help people get their next job and to create a good story. And sometimes you tell people that, and wait a minute, doesn't that hurt your attrition? Well, not really. I mean, if there's good jobs out there, people are going to take them. If you've prepared them for those roles and created an opportunity for them to go out and build on the system that you've put in place, you're just cementing your legacy by doing that. I think about it's hard to talk about legacy without bringing a few coaching kind of metaphors into this, and you think about how that relates to the metric you gave earlier with the head of sales, having this 18-month tenure, and I think in the software world it's even less than that. look, it doesn't matter. The story is done when you say the story's done. It's not, it's not whether you left to go take something better, or you were asked to leave, or you were promoted into a different role, or you took a lateral move in the company. All of those things can be great ways to enhance and continue the story. And I think it's important that leaders recognize that, and they develop people with that attitude. And that's why I have such a passion for that. That expression that I gave you, that my job is to help people find their next. You think about Bill Belichick, Saban, Urban Meyer. I mean, these guys are coaches that have led many other coaches. I mean, a lot of those guys have coaches that could be head coaches at huge programs that choose to be assistant, to be part of, to be part of that legacy.
But then they're also really comfortable with people interviewing them. So when Kirby Smart takes the job at Georgia, right, and he walks out, I mean, Saban's like, he was fantastic, but I can't get in the way, and he's got to get his opportunity to be the guy. And I love that statement.
Well, and if people probably forget the fact that Bill Belichick was fired by the Cleveland Browns, when they moved to Baltimore, or that Nick Saban was fired as a defensive back coach for Ohio State. Yeah. And so I think the lesson here is that people in Ohio just don't recognize talent. No, that's maybe one lesson, but no, the lesson is that their story was far from done at that point, and they took it upon themselves to create a legacy by developing future leaders and just the tentacles of what they've done. And I think that's something that you can do in 18 months in sales.
That's a great mindset. So then last question. So the sales leaders reporting to you totally get it, right? They want to be ahead of sales, and they might get it at a place where they report to you, or they might get it because they come to you and go, hey, Eric, phone rang, I took a call, one became two, next thing you know, I got an offer. Mm-hmm. And if it's a good offer, you want them to go reach their full potential.
Absolutely.
What about sales enablement? What about sales ops? What about the sort of bigger job, kind of traditional path that everybody's ascending to?
Yeah.
What do you do for those people?
Hey, thanks for asking this question. This is one of my favorite ones to answer. Leaders and managers are two different things. And so, I think that this is another thing that's very, very important for the CRO, for the head of sales, for, senior level leadership in a company to do, is identify the leaders. They're not related to title.
Yeah.
Because when you think about how do you build your legacy in a company, if you rely just on your managers to get that done, it's going to be a tough sled. You've got to find the other people in the organization. They're not necessarily all even salespeople, but the ones that possess those leadership characteristics to help, drive the agenda, to help build the strategy that you put together, and involve them in building that strategy and putting that together. It's important for you to identify those people and develop those skills. I tend to be more of the camp that, leaders are born, not made, but I think they're probably made a lot of times by their parents at an early age. But sometimes those people don't realize the incredible power that they have. And if you don't develop it for good, sometimes it just inadvertently becomes, developed for evil. And, if you develop it for good, it can be a great thing for helping you build and sustain a legacy. And if you can't, and they choose to use it for evil, get them out as fast as possible.
Cool, man. Always good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for coming by. All right, everybody. So that was a great show on a heady topic, around sales culture and building and sustaining your own personal legacy. I would tell you from the point of view that we have been in this business, we follow people as much as we follow companies. And it's very interesting after almost 13 years to look at where some sales leaders end up and who goes with them, and maybe where some don't, and they're constantly wondering what happened. So if you have a takeaway, I would tell you to leave you with this relative to the number of followers you create, and to Eric's point about my job is to help you on your next. I love that term, so we're going to steal that from him. But how are you helping your people reach their full potential? So, as always, you're part of the SBI audience, and I appreciate you for that. My team and I give you our best. I appreciate all the continued support. And as always, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.